Welcome to the Strong Bull Podcast, where serious athletes come to get after it. No shortcuts, no nonsense, proven methods backed by real science and training that hits hard. With over 40 years of combined experience, we're here to help you train smarter, lift heavier, and stay ahead of the game. Thanks for listening. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Strong Bull Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and subscribing. I'm your host, Dom Dixon, with my co-host, Rob Dela Cruz. We have a very great topic on hand today, probably one of my favorites to talk about because if you look at my content, it's pretty much all I do. We are talking about today how important is dedicated unilateral strength training, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. So I'm going to kick this one off. I think it is the 80%, in my opinion. I absolutely implement unilateral training far more than I implement bilateral training. And I really don't know when that switched for me. I think it was right around the time I started to dive into my own subject as, a programmer, using myself as a guinea pig, seeing the actual results from my training, stripping out more bilateral than unilateral. I started to notice a huge difference. Now, growing up, complete opposite. Bench press, deadlift, and back squat was like, I need two hands on the bar. I don't know what dumbbells are. I was all about the barbell. So my opinion, I think it is extremely beneficial because of life. Like my correlation is how often are you two hands squared up on most things that you come across in life. I'm probably the simple way to put it, in your day-to-day, whether that's sport, whether that's, playing a sport or just going through your daily life task. I think unilateral is way more implemented and way more frequently seen than bilateral. What about you, Rob? What's your thoughts?
I completely agree, but I want to jump in and I want to ask you some questions because I know you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is you big time,
Yeah.
and I'm excited for this topic. So, do you think if you do mostly unilateral work, you will lose bilateral strength?
I don't think you will. I think you'll lose familiarity with it. I think that generating power bilaterally is something that I've struggled with because I don't frequently tap into it, but I will say I don't lose maintenance of it. So like I can at any time go in bilateral squat, bilateral press, and bilateral hinge at any point in time. I think for me, I've never dipped below where I was at. My overall like maintenance, I've never dipped.
Okay, so and then what do you think it should look like? Now, are you talking about like a dedicated training phase, a block? What does it look like? 3 sets of 10, each leg, each arm, 5 by 5, each
Yeah.
leg, each arm. Like, what do you think with that?
No, this is a really good question because I've actually dipped in a lot of different phases of this. I've done the hypertrophy phase, I've done power phase, I've done more of like bodybuilding style phases as well, with just a lot more time and attention. And what I think is that it should always be implemented. Now, that percentage should be 60% sometimes, 80% sometimes. Sometimes you should trail back to 40%. I don't think you should go below 40% because I think, and me personally, I think the longevity of exercising is like critical with unilateral strength because I think that you can't really you hide a lot more imbalances with bilateral movements than you do with unilateral. I think unilateral is a great feedback tool. I think it's a great measuring tool as well for overall stability and proprioception, as well as power output. I think that if you have power with unilateral and you don't have compensation on the opposite side, I think it's a great way to let you know, all right, this is something that I need to work on. It's something that I've improved on. I think it's quickly to see if I struggle with doing a reverse lunge at 135 versus me doing a seated back squat at 315. I think you can tell a lot more about yourself with this single leg reverse lunge than you can with a bilateral back squat.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And with like years ago, I got caught kind of with my pants down about unilateral.
Yeah.
I had like a good squat, a good bench, like all the bilateral movements. They were nice and high. And then all of a sudden, I started touching unilateral, and I started realizing like I am way off balance.
Yeah.
Like I was actually like extremely weak comparative.
Yeah.
then started working on it. So what I started to notice is when you're going through a bilateral phase or block or whatever, I like people to completely step away
Yeah.
and maybe like just touching on stuff and going into a unilateral phase.
Yeah.
And what I've seen over the years with clients, like a lot of clients, getting them really strong bilaterally, and then also when you go back to getting them really strong unilaterally, excuse
Yeah.
me, and when you go back to the bilaterally, all of a sudden they're more stable. Their starting point and their base is higher.
Way higher. I completely agree. Absolutely. I
You
think,
know,
yeah,
it's amazing when I see that.
I think even for a period of time, I would use bilateral as a testing metric from my unilateral strength. So I would do that. I would remove myself from a pretty much majority of bilateral movements in general, do X amount of time unilaterally with my primary work, with my accessory work. Now I would obviously use like things like RPE or even percentages for some unilateral movements and then go back to bilateral. And I would notice even like not only would I notice like small measures of increase in weight, but I would notice overall, like you said, that balance and that control and the repeated output that I could give just from polishing up unilateral movements. For me, it was something huge. Like playing football, my body was banged up. I didn't know until I started, like you said, dipping into that unilateral pool. Like, wow, I'm off balance. Wow, I have really weak shoulders. You think in your head you can move things as one exertion from your body, but when you cut one side off, you're like, oh wow, I'm definitely going backwards here. But it's good because, like we said, it's a feedback tool that should be implemented. But I think a lot of people don't know where to start or where to even categorize it in programming.
Well, when you look at the unilateral, like for instance, if you're doing a dumbbell bench press,
Yeah.
that's actually it is unilateral, but there's different degrees. Now you take away one of the dumbbells,
Oh
now
yeah.
the whole body has to get ready to press on the one side. That's really unilateral.
Absolutely.
I have done this over and over with so many clients, and I love this. You go 5, 6 weeks of bilateral, you're squatting, you end at whatever weight for two, then you go through a bilateral or unilateral single leg with, say, Bulgarian squats.
Yeah.
Build them up over 4 to 5 weeks.
Hmm.
Go back to the back squat, and you will be amazed where you're at.
Absolutely.
Now,
I
if you did that normally and stepped away, you would come in and you would be a lot weaker. You have to hold yourself back because your start and set point is so high.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. I think for me, a lot of people would basically say that, oh, you're doing like the boring stuff or the accessory stuff. I'm like, to me, that's the meat and potatoes because back squat, you can only do so many variations of a back squat. You and I right now could rattle off 10 variations of a single leg squat or a
Yep.
lunge or a press or a pull. But you only have a certain amount of technically bilateral movements that you can do that you aren't getting too crazy. And I think the range of, very like the variety of them are just endless. You can add so many different elements, tempos. You can add different, like we talked about, overcoming isometrics, everything with unilateral strength and unilateral movements. But one thing I do want to pick your brain about because you've been doing this a lot longer and you definitely have dove into a lot more of the methods and studies of training. Do you think in your experience that barbells are for everybody, like bilateral movements, but barbell movements in particular? Is that a good thing to have in your program, or is something that you should shy away from for certain populations or bouts of people?
We always got to say it depends on the individual.
Yeah,
Um, Bilateral and barbell movements in general, you can really load them pretty heavy.
yeah,
They definitely have their place, and they can definitely enhance an individual as far as like their strength. And it's hard to compete. But I believe it's really good to step away from them for periods of time.
yeah,
And they could be like small blocks or whatever phases. Not every individual, it depends on the movement. Not every individual is like meant to really deadlift with a barbell, really, or back squat with a barbell. And that's where you can use other tools to come into place. Like you said, you're just like me. We're not married to specific exercises.
Yep.
The movement pattern's more important to me.
Yeah.
Hey, one of my favorites is the barbell back squat. It's all like I have it all over
Yeah.
Instagram and it's always on there, but I'm not married to it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I'm the opposite. You will never see me post a barbell back squat. Which is why people are listening right now, like, Dom never back squat. You're absolutely right. I go through periods of time where I don't touch it. And then my clients who are listening right now, you will always going to back squat because I know the importance of it. But me personally, my relationship with barbell back squatting is not something that I'm, again, married to. It's something that I dabble with from time to time. There's phases where I get on where I'm like, all right, got a back squat. But to me, I don't know if it's like exercise ADHD. I just can't, I just don't enjoy it. And that's a personal thing. Like I'm not competing. I'm trying to be, like we said, healthy. So for me, I'm like, all right, I can get this same exact benefit several different ways to me personally, because I've been doing it for so long. But I do agree that it is something that depends. I think a lot of people, it does do a good job at teaching people. I think it's a good way to get weight in people's hands. It's a great starting point if you are, kind of familiar with training and you want to get into that realm of, variety and seeing how you can push yourself optimally. I think it's a great way to use and a great tool to implement.
But yeah, the barbell, I don't think it's a requirement. You can get a lot done. It is a great tool. And you'll notice with me, like you'll see me starting a back squat, but there's usually weeks and
Yeah,
weeks in between
it's not
before I
random.
get into a phase of it.
Yeah, it's not random. I think there's a lot of people out there training and they just do a lot of random training, especially with the barbell. They kind of like just, all right, we're gonna try this today. We're gonna throw it up. I'm bored. I don't know what to do 5 by 5, which is all great in theory. But I think when you're progressing people, I think that you should have a plan in place so that you can see, you get some result from the work that you put in for sure.
Yeah. And like what I think with the unilateral work, it's all the same strength rep ranges
Yeah,
work with the unilateral.
absolutely. I agree.
The rear elevated Bulgarian split squats. 5 by 5 each leg works really well. You get really stronger. Or
I,
5 by 7, or like those rep ranges work really well with those. As long as because there's a little bit of balance and there's some more like technicality in those movements sometimes,
yeah,
especially with lunges or something or individual arms.
yeah,
But as long as that movement quality is there, by all means, turn it up.
I agree. Couldn't agree more. It's a perfect way to end the episode today, guys. So if you are tuning in and you guys are, wondering what we're talking about, unilaterally, we're talking about single side, single arm, single leg, so on and so forth. And you're looking at two guys who loved using unilateral movements. Again, not married to any exercise in particular, but we're married to the movement patterns. So if you guys have any questions, any comments, drop the comments what your favorite unilateral movement is, and we'll be sure to address it on the next episode.